Hi, I'm Annie Ward, and I wrote the book Beautiful Bad. So usually when I get an idea, I know almost immediately whether it would make a better book or a screenplay. The smaller ideas, like maybe like a romantic comedy or an action story, those I tend to think screenplay. And something like this book, which is more of, it started out as an epic memoir and then turned into a psychological thriller. I know that I want to put in the commitment, to spend the time and write a book. This is a pretty personal question because I didn't have to do a lot of research into PTSD. I married a man who had spent 16 years in Rwanda, Bosnia, and Iraq, and so I knew that he had some things that he struggled with, like nightmares and anxiety. So I had my own PTSD library, if you will. And when we moved back to Kansas, he started seeing a therapist for PTSD, and I got to hear a little bit about his sessions. So when I started writing the book, there wasn't a whole lot of research that needed to be done, and if there was, I always had the internet. I was a big fan of suspense and thrillers. I've been a big fan of them ever since I was about 20 years old, and I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and that book blew my mind. I was an English major at the time. I'd read mostly literary fiction, women's fiction, and then I read this book with these, it wasn't even so much the crime, it was just the cast of characters that I loved so much. So that was really what started my interest in the genre. And then, I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but like a lot of people, my interest was reignited when I read Gone Girl, because I was, again, like The Secret History, totally blown away. I'd been doing a lot of different kinds of writing in between, young adult, literary fiction, screenplays. That was when I realized that I wanted to try to do it myself. So my initial research into crime scenes would be called my obsession with crime scenes, which started way back, like the Menendez trial. I was glued to the television for that. Casey Anthony, Jodi Arias. I have always been an avid viewer of true crime. I bought my little library of guidebooks, the how-to forensics, the how-to police procedure. But then I had this really, my husband used to be a military policeman, so sometimes when I would be trying to figure out how to craft a crime scene in the afternoon while the kids are at school, we would like go sneaking around the house, and he would show me like how you would go up the stairs or how you would clear this room, how to hold the flashlight, how to hold the gun. So that was a super fun way to do research. And then again, whenever you hit a wall, there's always the internet. I have absolutely struggled with writer's block. I don't know if you mean the kind of writer's block where you've been writing for months and then one day you can't write. But for me, writer's block comes once a week or maybe once a day. And the way that I deal with it is I take the dogs for a walk. I always take the dogs for a walk and feel much better. And usually by not pressuring myself to come up with an idea, my imagination gets moving. And then I know that not everyone has dogs. So if you couldn't take your dogs for a walk, I would just say take a nap. Because, that's when you can think the best, when you're not telling yourself to.